please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Has unveiled his verdict on the GOP tax plan, saying it'll cost $1.487 trillion to be exact. It means that the bill complies with the special reconciliation rules that would allow Republicans to fast-track the bill and not require support from the Dems. But as Blaine Alexander reports, the bill faces opposition from some Republican quarters as well as business.
It's the grand GOP rollout. Top House Republicans pushing their new tax reform plan, touted as helping the middle class.
This is a very important and special moment for our country, for all Americans.
We will grow our economy by delivering more jobs.
90% of Americans will be able to fill out their taxes on a postcard.
What exactly is in the plan? Fewer tax brackets, higher standard deduction, and a new family credit. It would also cut the corporate tax rate from 35% down to 20%, preserves 401k plans, but gets rid of the state tax deductions. So what does this really mean for the middle class? Experts say it depends.
Every one of these little tax breaks is going to change, and so each family will have a different higher tax burden or lower tax burden depending on what they were paying before.
President Trump pushing his party to act before the holidays.
We're working to give the American people a giant tax cut for Christmas. We are giving them a big, beautiful Christmas present.
But some Republicans worried about the short timeline and adding an estimated $1.5 trillion to the deficit.
This is something that could affect us for the next 20 to 30 years, so it's all the more reason why I think we should have more debate.
I didn't know I was going to be given a prompt.
For Republicans, that debate and the sell starting immediately, with the clock ticking down to the end of the year. And this is top priority for Republicans. In fact, when President Trump leaves on his foreign trip tomorrow, a lot of his top advisors will stay behind and try and push this through Congress and across the country. Blaine Alexander, NBC News, Washington.
And another big decision by Trump. He named his Fed chair, Jay Powell. No surprises, the president named the Fed governor to succeed Janet Yellen, making Yellen one of the very few first-term Fed chiefs not to be reappointed to a second term. First time it's happened in 40 years. Here was Powell's initial comments.
While post-crisis improvements in regulation and supervision have helped to achieve these gains, I will continue to work with my colleagues to ensure that the Federal Reserve remains vigilant and prepared to respond to changes in markets and evolving risks.
And the market reaction, very, very muted. This was widely expected, leaked whatever to the markets. 10-year, look at that one, 2.3487. That's a very little change there. And may as well check the U.S. dollar before we move on here as well. Let's bring in Sri for more on this. Well, Sri, I don't know if they can meet the deadline. Trump wants it delivered to his desk by the 23rd of the month. That's pretty ambitious.
Yeah, and I think that this is going to have implications for Mr. Powell as well. The market likes him, but the Fed arguably is going to have to pivot pretty quickly in terms of their policy stance for the future if tax cuts do get passed and if there is an inflation overshoot. But right now, both of those questions are big ifs, given the political divide in Congress and given the skepticism out there in the market and amongst economists that this won't have in its present form a meaningful impact on the broader economy. Let's leave that one lying for now and get back to Mr. Powell. The markets like him. He is being perceived very strongly as the continuity candidate, so this is good news in terms of the status quo. Richard Jerram, chief economist at Bank of Singapore, says that he looks like a centrist. He's a Yellen-like chair, but you've got to go back to this question of Mr. Powell's background in the capital markets, less so in economic academia, and ask yourself the question of whether this is an asset and a liability when it comes to shaping policy and consensus on the FOMC. Former Dallas Fed President Richard Fisher says that it's not. Listen in.
What he brings to bear here, in addition to understanding how this monetary policy evolved after the correction, after the crash, is an understanding of financial markets, which Ben Bernanke, who I served under, Janet Yellen, who I adored serving under, both of them, neither of them came from the capital market side. And it wasn't just McChesney Martin that didn't have a PhD in economics. Paul Volcker didn't have a PhD in economics. So that's not requisite here. And I think Jay has learned an enormous amount. But bringing the capital market sensitivity here, he contributed on that front to all of our discussions starting in 2012 when he joined in a very wise manner.
Here's the rub, though, Bernie, and let me put this rhetorical question to you. Who do you think is going to be vice chair? Because that position is still open, and if it is John Taylor, then there could be something of a hawkish tilt to policy. He could provide the offset to Jay Powell, who is seen as a consensus builder. And of course, if the vice chair is John Taylor, then what happens to that eponymous Taylor rule? Is that going to be part of the policy mix?
Yeah, I'm going to go on a limb here and say Gary Cohn, just for the heck of it, because nobody else is doing it, as a perceived way for Trump to keep a finger on the pulse, maybe a little more closely because of his ties with him. But elsewhere, I guess as totally expected, over in old Blighty, the Bank of England hiked rates for the first time in a decade. But Sri, it's not a real hike. It's sort of a fake hike because they cut and made an emergency cut post-Brexit vote last year.
So there's an element of normalisation here, but if you look at the market's reaction, it was pretty unequivocally dovish when you consider the longer-term implications for policy. This is by no means of the imagination the beginning of a tightening cycle, but the problem or the dilemma, more specifically, that the Bank of England is in, Bernie, is it's presented with arguably a stagflationary situation where you've got sticky inflation and relatively low economic growth, and it has to try to adjust the policy balance as a result of that. But longer term, the economic situation is going to be very uncertain. So much of all of this hinges on Brexit, so arguably the Bank of England have to keep rates relatively low.
Thanks, Sri. All right, this just in. Trump almost lost his position, believe it or not, oh my goodness, as tweeter-in-chief. Oh, Sacra Blue, can you imagine? The world's ending. President Trump's Twitter handle, @RealDonaldTrump, if you didn't know, was offline for 11 minutes. Wow, that's a lifetime in the world of Trump. Twitter says it was inadvertently deactivated due to human error by a Twitter employee. Company says it's investigating the incident and will make sure it doesn't happen again. Okay, Jack. Find out what's going on inside your house, all right? Coming up, what will Jay Powell mean for Asia? As the head of the Fed, we'll talk about central bank policy, and markets can continue their march up north.